What's going on, everybody? Tej back again with another video, and today we're talking about my Week 13 NFL Power Rankings, and we're back on the green screen, so normal setup here for this week. Do apologize for me traveling during the holiday season. I'm bouncing around from different places, family, friend, all that sort of stuff. So less than ideal lighting conditions. You're having to deal with the box as opposed to me on a back. So do apologize for all that. But hopefully you all had a great Thanksgiving and had a little bit of a break, a chance to kind of slow down, relax, and want to catch up with some people that I haven't talked to in a while too. So hopefully it was a great holiday season, and hopefully you're excited to talk about my Week 13 Power Rankings. An exciting week of football, all 32 teams playing, so 16 games to talk about. So let's jump right into it. Houston Texans, sorry Houston fans, it's another loss. Kyle Allen didn't change much, so you're going to stick there at 32. Solid showing in the second half, but we'll talk about that once we get to Miami a little bit later. Really, the Dolphins only played 30 minutes of that game. So anyways, it's tough for the Texans, and they're just not doing a whole lot of the little things right. Like it's 3rd down and 18, and Jace Atkins is coughing it up in the flat, giving Miami a touch, little things like this. This team's just not ready to win yet. So sorry, you're stuck at 32, but when it comes to the NFL draft, you'll be excited about that. Then the Bears, another loss there. No Justin Fields this week as well. It was Trevor Siemian, outmatched by Mike White, but part of that's also just the scheme and what the Jets have done. We'll talk about the Jets once we get there, but hey, the Bears, playing without their, the best player right now, and Justin Fields and everything he can do with his legs, opens up that offense a ton. I don't think it's, I don't think this is a game where you can take nothing from it, but yeah, another team that should be prioritizing losing to get at the top end of the draft pick and try to reinvigorate this roster with some young talent, Will Anderson and Jalen Carson, like that. Then we get to the Broncos. They're down a spot after I lost to the Carolina Panthers. You lose by double digits, against Carolina. I know it's in Carolina, but that's a bad look. And then you got players barking at Russell Wilson. I'm honestly a little surprised. I'm recording this right around 11:30 on Tuesday. You're going to see this here in a couple hours. I'm surprised we haven't gotten, the Nathaniel Hackett news that he's been, let go. It's just kind of surprising. But hey, he's still got his job, and I guess he's going to finish out the rest of the season. Don't know about much more than that, but yeah, same old Broncos. That offense is lethargic. Then we get to the Panthers. Yeah, they beat the Broncos. I don't think it's a win you can necessarily, hang your hat on, but hey, Sam Darnold looked okay, and it's probably going to be his job the rest of the way. What my biggest takeaway from this is, one, Sam Darnold's going to continue to be Sam Darnold, so if you're a DJ Moore fantasy owner, congratulations. This is going to be huge this time of the year in your postseason run. But also, it just makes me really wonder what happened to Baker Mayfield, right? Not that he was ever a superstar or anything, but the second half of his second year when Freddie Kitchens was the interim, or actually he was just the OC, and they had just moved on from Hugh Jackson. He had some moments, and that year with Kevin Stefanski, the year Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year, he looked good. And then you look at last year, obviously he's playing banged up, and then this year, we see games for PJ Walker making big time throws, and it's okay, whoa, PJ Walker, I'm signing me up for more of that. There's also bad PJ Walker, and then this week, not that Sam Darnold lit the world on fire, he didn't really throw that much, but he was not as bad as I would have anticipated. I dare say he impressed me a little bit, but then it's man, Baker never really did it this year. So I'm concerned about what his stock looks like moving forward. I'm interested to see if he gets another starting opportunity, because he's still young, former number 1 overall pick, all those things carry with a guy, so we'll have to wait and see. Then the Rams, this team's just a bad football team. Now, Allen Robinson seems like he's out. Bryce Perkins is starting this game. And it's a shame because Aaron Donald's still playing, great brand of football. It's a year in Jalen Ramsey's prime. Bobby Wagner's still a good player. There's so much defensive talent that's just being squandered. And the defense is just, Darion Kendrick continues to be picked on. Leonard Floyd hasn't been great this year. They need another edge rusher. There's plenty of things to be concerned about and worried about with that defense, but those 3 guys are, an aging player like Wagner still playing good football, though, and then Donald and Ramsey, I think it's fair to say they're still in their prime, and you just kind of wasted a year of it. So, I don't know, this Rams team is just in all sorts of bad spots, and honestly, we all, if you've ever stubbed your toe or hit the washing machine or a dishwasher, I should say, as it's down, whatever, those little small inconveniences in your life where you're you're mumbling and muttering shit under your breath. I know that's what Sean McVay was doing after that man got chipped in the chin. And if you 90s kid reference here, if you watch Fairly Odd Parents growing up, the dude with the chin that was like a superhero or whatever, Sean McVay, if he's interested, might be a role somewhere there for you. But I know in that moment he's probably thinking, I don't need this crap. Get me up in the booth. And I think that might be where we see him next year. I'm actually thinking about doing a little bit of because I'm a play-by-play broadcaster. So if you didn't know, I'm a sports broadcaster by day job. But be interested kind of giving my rankings of what crews I think are my favorite. It'd be interesting to see where Sean McVay might, fit into that mix and what place might sign him. And is he at number 1? Is he the number 2? All that sort of stuff. But it's starting to feel more and more likely that he's not going to be on the sideline next year. We'll see. Maybe that's just a little bit of a rush. Maybe it's in 2 years' time, but definitely feels like the Sean McVay era is starting to come closer and closer to its end, especially when he's just catching not cheap shots, unfortunate blows on the sideline. I mean, this team's just bad too, so I don't know how much longer he wants to deal with all that. Anyways, tangent aside, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. They did their best to make sure Washington could cover that spread. So if you bet on Washington, write some thank you cards down to the ATL. You only scored 13 points. I know that Washington defense has been playing better, but this is a team that moved the ball in chunks on the ground. I thought they would stick with that. And Cordero Patterson played a really good game. And Drake London, is making insane catches. And just Marcus Mariota is not doing enough to elevate that offense, right? And I had Drake London anytime touchdown plus 310. You see that crazy catch in the first quarter. It's like, why is he not getting more targets in the red zone? So as much as I do like Arthur Smith and what he's doing on the run game side, it's just like, why isn't Kyle Pitt? He had a high target share percentage, but it felt like those targets never came in high leverage spots. Now it feels like I'm saying the same thing about Drake London. So why is that? So also, can we just see Des Ridder? At this point, Marcus Mariota is not the guy. Like, it's pretty clear he's not the guy. Not that he's a travesty. He's not an absolute bum, but he's not the guy. So let me just see what Des Ridder is. And worst comes to worst, you lose games, he's not the guy either. And picking towards the top of the first round, hey, if Will Levis fell in our lap, cool. Or hey, picking the top of the second round, Hendon Hooker were to come to us, maybe we think about it. So I just want to know. I just want to see, and it could definitely be worse than Mariota, but at the same time, I think he could also get even just at least marginally better. So I don't know. Obviously, that makes me a little concerned about Ridder, considering they're continuing to stick with Marcus Mariota. They see him every day in practice. I don't. So what do I know? The Raiders, pretty solid win. And how about Josh Jacobs? Actually, I was finding this picture. Let me use the right hand here. To using this image or whatever. It's funny, I found this picture and right underneath it was like another suggested picture of Josh Jacobs or whatever, but it was linked and attached to an article of like Josh Jacobs playing in the Hall of Fame game. Is he on the block? And I was like, wow. Remember a couple months ago when we were asking ourselves that, myself included, I was like, what are they doing with Josh Jacobs? Is this guy about to be traded? What's going on here? And now he's having a career year, and the franchise tag's only about $1.5 million more than the 5th-year option, so he may well still be in Vegas next year the way he's running, but an insane performance, 300 plus scrimmage yards and the walk-off 86-yard rushing touchdown. Guy's been fantastic. And back-to-back wins for the Raiders. Don't count him out yet. And Josh McDaniels, stringing together some wins. Hopefully he can start figuring it out. And, Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams have been the big parts of that offense. So hopefully they can kind of build upon that and then, patch up that defense next year. And maybe this team's, back to where we thought they would be coming into this season. Then we get to the Steelers. Pretty nice win on Monday Night Football. I think Kenny Pickett played his best game of his career. George Pickens continues to be just a freak and a highlight play a night or a day with that guy, which is awesome. And it was encouraging to see this team win, especially in the second half. Once you see some chunk runs from Anthony McFarland. Once Najee Harris left this game, I was like, okay, especially when we're considering we're playing from a league, this could be concerning because you already had no Jaylen Warren. But Anthony McFarland, Benny Snell, I think they continue to move the chains. Pickett made some big throws. You had a couple drops there from Pickens as well, and from Deontay Johnson on that fade in the corner. But all things considered, I think this is a pretty solid showing for a really young offense. So I'll take it, and it's a win on the road, which is you just gotta piece that as you go along. And the defense continues to be solid enough. Now I do think in the second half, Matt Ryan and the Colts were starting to gash them enough. But when push came to shove late in the fourth quarter, they came off some stops. And, they generated that turnover, on that fumble between Matt Ryan and Jonathan Taylor. So they found stops, which is key. And, this team's not making the playoffs or anything. But at this point, it's like, what momentum can you build for yourself? Head into hopefully a good offseason, right? Make the most of a first-round pick, your top 100 picks, really. Clinical signings once you get to free agency. This team could legitimately turn around in 1 year. Now, granted, the AFC North still could be really, really good next year, so we'll see how much. But, with a rookie quarterback, sometimes that rebuild can be slingshot. So if you're a Steelers fan, you're looking for things to hope and cling on to for next season and trying to build a case for maybe why you're a sleeper team next year in the AFC. Let's move on to 17 through 24. Now we got the Jags at 24. Really nice win. And, this is the first time we can say, Pickett's coming off the best game of his career, and now for Trevor Lawrence in year 2, it's like, this is the first time we can say that he won the game for the Jags, right? They have won games, and there have been moments where he's looked impressive, but this was a Trevor Lawrence win, especially in the fourth quarter, right? Like, he's zipping passes into a cover 2 hole, finding Christian Kirk on the sideline. And, the Ravens defense hasn't lived up to my expectations this year, but nonetheless, give credit to Trevor Lawrence. This was the game we've been waiting to see. This is the game that's like, That's a number 1 overall pick. That's a franchise quarterback. That's why people said he's the next Luck. He's the next Peyton Manning. All that sort of stuff. And then obviously, the touchdown late. You see this picture on your screen. The 2-point conversion. He made some big throws. And honestly, those receivers stepped up and made some big plays too. So kudos to, Doug Peterson and the offense as a whole. The execution level was at a high clip on Sunday and taking down a good team, right? And then they got some stops on defense. I don't think it was the prettiest game played by Baltimore. We'll talk about them later on, but the Jags won this game. Trevor Lawrence won this game, and if you're a Jags fan, you've been waiting quite some time to be able to say that. And, I want to talk about Andrew Wingard, too, in some of his comments. Basically, he said that Trevor didn't really have, a rookie year as Urban Meyer, and we already knew that was a huge stint on Lawrence's growth, but I think maybe, if he has a strong end of this year, we'll be able to really kind of quantify how big of a misfire that Urban Meyer hiring was, specifically for the growth of Trevor Lawrence as a rookie. So, interesting to see. Still got some football left this year, but hopefully Trevor Lawrence can build upon his performance this past weekend. Hey, Browns got a nice solid win. MJ Emerson, the artist formerly known as Martin Emerson, coming out of Mississippi State, really liked him as a prospect, this long, lanky man press type of corner. MJ Emerson really held his own against Mike Evans. Now, I think Brady could have had him on that last target. Maybe there's, a big play to be had there. It looked like Evans had a step on him, but nonetheless, Emerson really impressed in this one. And for a Browns defense that started the year just bad, right? The last couple of weeks, they've kind of gone back and forth of like, hey, we'll get gashed, but then also we can shut down Tom Brady and Mike Evans and company. Chris Godwin in a big game, but all things considered, that, they really limited Tampa Bay's offense in a pretty efficient way. And then on the other side, Jacoby Brissett, I should have known, betting perspective, I should have known hammer the Browns money line. Jacoby was not going to go out on a bad note. Also, there's something like every time Ohio State loses, the Browns win. That's an interesting thing I'll continue to monitor and, maybe throw some bets on in the future. But, Jacoby played really well. They got some big runs out of, Nick Chubb. He obviously gets the game winner. Amari Cooper, big play on a busted coverage late, too. He continues to be really good. So you see the pieces. They're there. Now we've seen it all come together, especially on the defensive side. And next week, we get our first look at Deshaun Watson. I don't think this team is live for the playoffs, but never say never. And really, this is just kind of building, kind of like the Steelers, building momentum towards next year now that Deshaun Watson's back in the fold. Let me get the Cardinals down a spot. Look, this team is just kind of like Nathaniel Hackett. I'm surprised I haven't heard Cliff Kingsbury's lost his job. Now, granted, he did get the extension. And let me get on a small detour here. I think this is the Sean Payton landing spot. Now let me explain this. He's talked about potentially, the Broncos maybe, or the Chargers were one I've heard a lot of. I don't think the Broncos are going to move on from George Payton. And I think Sean Payton wants control of the roster. I think he wants what Ron Rivera has in Washington, where there's a GM in place, but Ron Rivera is the director of player personnel and he's the head coach. I think that's what Sean Payton wants. And I don't think George Payton's going to give him that. And I'm not sure the Chargers are going to do that either, considering, the great offseasons they've had over the last couple of years. The GM in place drafted Justin Herbert, signed J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, all that sort of stuff. Drafted Joey, but I don't think they're going to get, I think it's Tom Telesera, I think it's his name. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I don't think they're going to get rid of him. So, I look at the Cardinals in their situation where it's like, I could see a frustrated owner doing all three of these things. But I'll start with the one that I think needs to happen first, firing Steve Keim. He's been there for almost 2 decades and has marginal wins. So you got to move on from that as a GM. But that opens up the door for Sean Payton as the director of player personnel. And then, Cliff Kingsbury, I think, is the next, head to go, right? Like the next head to roll. It's just, when you have your quarterback saying schematically we're fucked, sorry for my language, but you just can't have that. That's bad. That's just as rough as it gets. And then, maybe that third leg of this is a clean house, move on, and you get rid of Kyler Murray too. I know the extension. I get it. But I could also see a world where Sean Payton and Aaron Rodgers want to team up. Sean Payton and Tom Brady want to team up, right? So I think the Kyler part of it is the least likely. But to that point, I could also see Sean Payton engineering a world where it's like, hey, Adrian Wilson, who, former Cardinal, was in the mix for the Jags job, he's going to be my GM, but I'm going to be the director of player personnel. I'm going to be the head coach, and I'll keep Kyler, or I'll do something else, whatever. But I could see Sean Payton assuming those two positions. Let's say he keeps Kyler Murray, short quarterback, kind of like what he had with Drew Brees. Obviously, a very different skill set from beyond that point. But I think that's a logical spot for him to step into that makes sense for what Sean Payton wants, but also makes sense for what the Cardinals need to do, right? So I think the Cardinals make the most sense for Sean Payton. Sorry, a little bit of a detour there, but this team, this is the type of conversation we need to have about the Cardinals because it's not happening this year. Like, they're not making the playoffs. They're not making a deep run. Forget about the on-field product because it's just not great. Like, when you have your quarterback saying that you're schematically screwed up, it's just not going to happen. So encouraging spot to take away from this. Sorry, Arizona fans. D-Hop, Hollywood Brown on the field at the same time. Hopefully that continues to build upon itself. James Conner also out there. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him and his contract at the end of this year. The other side of the ball, I still think Vance Joseph's doing a lot with a little. It's amazing that the Cardinals were leading throughout this game, but ultimately, they give up that touchdown lead and then the 2-point conversion. Another team that walked it off with the 2-point conversion. We'll talk about the Chargers when we get there, but sorry, not a whole lot to talk about when it comes to the Cardinals' perspective, other than I think Sean Payton, this might be his spot. So anyways, tell me what you think about that theory down below. Then the Colts also coming off a loss. I have them ahead of the Steelers. Deal with it. They have a better record and they've won more games. And also I just think, 8 times out of 10, 7 times out of 10, I think this is probably a Colts win. Matt Ryan's making enough plays and they're moving the ball. Ultimately, they dug themselves too big of a hole in the first half. If Matt Ryan doesn't go 5 of 13 in the first half, this offense is a little bit more alive and awake. I think Jonathan Taylor had 6 carries in the first half, which, I'm a pro throw the ball, proponent here. But those types of things where Jonathan Taylor's your best offensive player, limited touches, you didn't get a whole lot moving through the air either. So therefore, Pittman isn't a huge part of the mix either. So it was just a slow start to the day offensively, and you dug yourself a hole. And you started to move the ball pretty well in the second half, as I talked about. You had those 2 drives, one that was cut short with the fumble from Ryan to Taylor, but then you get it right back and you move the ball back down the field and eventually get a touchdown. So there were moments where they moved the ball really, really well, but ultimately, when push came to shove, it was the Steelers who made the big plays. So Colts down a spot. Commanders up a couple more spots. This team is just figuring out. I think this is the week where I maybe start to fade them betting-wise, just because, this Taylor Heineke thing ain't going to last but so long. But hey, Brian Robinson, I want to give him a shout out here. Especially when he first came back, it felt like he didn't have that same, I don't want to say he's explosive, because coming out of Alabama, we really won this guy who was going to break off 80-yard runs or anything like that. But he had a little bit more juice and wiggle to him. When he first came back, obviously still dealing with, an insane incident coming into the season where he was shot. So, it's amazing he's even playing. So I think at the beginning of the year, maybe he was still working his way back up to 100%. Now we're starting to see a little bit more out of him. I think they got a nice duo with him and Antonio Gibson, who I think's become a better pure ball carrier with his vision and everything. So that's exciting. And the defense, this defense really has turned around. Playing like a full unit, right? And I think Jamin Davis has taken a step forward. I think Cole Holcomb's back to playing some good football. They still don't have Chase Young. And then also Benjamin St. Juste has put together a string of really good games. They held a pretty efficient Falcons offense to 13 points. Need I say more? And then you get the interception in the end zone. And then the last thing I want to talk about, man, that's Sean Taylor statue. That's a bad look. And I'm from Virginia. I'm from this area. And look, no matter how you try to spin it, maybe it's like a creative choice trying to do something different. That's not a statue, homie. And that's the best player and most recognizable player that team's had in 2, 3, 4 decades. You have to go back to, probably the mid-90s for players that, like the John Riggins, even the Art Monks and those types of players in the world. And Champ Bailey, but most people think of him as a Bronco. When you think of Washington and their star players of the last 2 decades at least, it's Sean Taylor's top of the list. So for a player who had such a tragic end of their life, it's really just disappointing to see they put up a mannequin wearing a Sean Taylor jersey. That's a tough look there. But anyways, just had to get that off my chest because that's frustrating. A string of frustrating teams here. Lions lost, but they battled the Bills pretty hard, so I want to keep them here, and I still think they're a better team than the Commanders. Same thing for the Saints. That was an ugly showing against San Francisco, and Andy Dalton is fine. He's stable. He's consistent. He's had some good games, but you also get this where you lose 13-0. You have 2 turnovers in the red zone. Yikes. Just an ugly showing. But at the same time, I respect where that defense should be and the names on paper. And, we've seen this offense have big games. Lions, Saints, I think I'd take the Saints. I think they'd be the team laying points on a neutral field. So New Orleans just ahead of them, but also just 2 inconsistent teams and 2 not 2 great teams in general. Then we get the Packers loss. Yeah, the Aaron Rodgers injury. He's saying he'll suit up until his team's, out of the playoff hunt. I think Green Bay's decision should be just, we're going to roll with Bryce Young. We're going to roll with Jordan Love next week, because who knows, we might be in the running for, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis next year, depending on how the rest of the season breaks out, the draft board plays out, all that stuff. And Jordan Love looked pretty good at the end of the game. And hey, we talked about this with my big board that came out a couple weeks ago. If you missed that, definitely go back, check it out. I'm a sucker for these toolsy types of quarterbacks. I love these guys. And because, I think there's multiple advantages. One, because when they work out, they look like Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. But also, I think when they don't work out, they kind of look like Zach Wilson. And within 2 years, hey, we're going to move on from this guy. So I think there's upside from both angles from it when they work and when they don't work. And, Jordan Love if I were to power rank the toolsy quarterbacks of the last 5 years, probably had him ahead of Malik Willis, but he's not up there with Justin Herbert, and he's not up there with, if you want to call Trevor Lawrence a project. I have Trey Lance ahead of him. So all these toolsy types we've had over the last couple of years, and Josh Allen was my number one player in 2018. He'd be the chieftain of them all. Big Josh Allen guy. But Love's probably on the lower end of that spectrum, but nonetheless, easily the most confident he's looked. Now, my question is going to be, and part of why I want to see him against a bad Bears defense that made Mike White look like the truth. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to see it because last Sunday was as comfortable as he's ever looked. Easily the most comfortable he's ever looked. Now, granted, when you're down by 2 scores and it's like, whatever, you can go out there and just be a gunslinger and throw it around and, hey, Christian Watson's going to take us to the house. Maybe there's a game here. What I want to see is Chicago wins the coin toss next week and defers to the second half, and they say, hey, Jordan Love, first drive goes to you. Let me see it. Because then you're not playing loose and free and down 2 scores, whatever happens, happens. It's like, hey, if I make a mistake here, I'm putting the Bears in a good position to upset us, who we like to go to Chicago and win games. So it'll be interesting to see if we see Love or Rodgers, but I hope we see Love because I think there's some data and something to take away. And if you're Green Bay, if he looks good, maybe it was just a late blooming prospect and now he's your guy. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is back in Green Bay next year, so I think you need to see what he's all about. So we'll have to wait and see. Rodgers obviously is going to dictate the course this goes, and if he doesn't like the direction Green Bay goes, this is going to become a huge media story. So we'll have to wait and see. But also, this Packers run defense is just rough. I thought this was my number one defense coming into the season. Same thing with Washington last year, where they really let me down despite a preseason number 1 ranking. And maybe I thought too much of that secondary, considering in the front 7 there's still some problems. Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth did a great job. You didn't hear them call out Kenny Clark's name until the end of the game when they're saying, hey, well, we didn't really call out Kenny Clark a whole lot today. Yeah, rough. And then also Devondre Campbell out. That doesn't help. So just a bad spot for that front 7 right now for Green Bay. But anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the top 16 now. I'm moving a little slow. I do apologize. But the Bucs, hey, that's a frustrating loss. But Chris Godwin's playing better football. We'll have to wait and see about this Tristan Wirfs injury. Sounds like they missed on a potential huge scare there. Donovan Smith got bodied by Myles Garrett, but we kind of expected that. And that defense, Devin White's flying around the field, but he's also, I think, still responsible for a lot of those big, mistakes. And I will give him credit. I'm not blaming him for that David Njoku touchdown. That catch was crazy. So, just a game the Bucs should have won. And realistically, the biggest weakness working against him is that coaching staff right now. And I want to like Todd Bowles, and I want to like Byron Leftwich. He was the guy I wanted to see get the Jags job. But when you hear quotes like, it's about rush attempts, not rush yards. What? And then you look at the end of the game, right? You got like 33 seconds, 3 timeouts with the greatest quarterback of all time, specifically at making fourth quarter comebacks. You start with the screen. You don't call a timeout. Then you get the big hit, the big, seam play to Julio Jones, and it's like, okay, we're knocking the door, but we didn't call a timeout, so now there's not enough time and whatever. We have a drop from pass from Cameron Brate, and now we just got to chuck a Hail Mary. Like, they're just poorly run right now. It's just, it's sad, honestly, the state of the affairs right now in Tampa Bay. So if Brady plays another year, it'll be interesting to see how much he speaks on that coaching staff and what he says about that coaching staff and what potential moves. Like, does he go LeBron here? Like, I'm blow it up. I don't want these guys. I don't want that guy here. Bring in these people. I want Bruce Arians back. I can't wait to see. That's going to be a fun story. The Giants lost, but, I think they hung relatively tough with the Cowboys, especially in the first half. Got a couple picks from Dak. Like, Dak, I think, is a really cerebral, really good quarterback at the line of scrimmage and above the shoulders. So to get a couple picks off of him in 30 minutes of football, I think that's pretty impressive. And then you get the backdoor cover, so shout out to them for that. People who bet the Giants on Thanksgiving, I know they're thankful for that. But I think this team's still I think Brian Dable's still maximizing what little he has on that roster, which is still so impressive. Now, granted, I think they're continuing to lose games. They'll probably move down these power rankings, but all the teams below them, the Bucs, the Saints, the Packers, the Lions, they all lost. So they're going to stick put here at 15 because I do respect what Brian Dable's done. Titans coming off a loss. It was close there with the Bengals. They almost had the game script they wanted, right? Like, it's close, it's low scoring. This is a game where Derrick Henry could take over at any moment. But ultimately, that secondary got picked on by T. Higgins and Joe Burrow, and that's ultimately the difference. So still some pieces away, but I'm still amazed at how much Mike Vrabel's been able to get out of another team that's depleted when it comes to injuries and having to play third and fourth stringers at a lot of different positions. So really encouraging as a Titans fan. I think this team's going to win the AFC South, and, hey, they just got outmatched by a better AFC team, in my opinion. Patriots lose to the Vikings on Thanksgiving in the Thursday night game. It was an awesome game. Completely different what I expected to see happen. Mac Jones plays the best game of his season, right? He had like a 50% completion percentage on throws beyond 10 yards. He went like 9 of 13 against the Vikes. He was gashing Minnesota's secondary, which if you're a Vikings fan, wee woo. But if you're a Pats fan, like, okay, sweet. Now it's starting to come together. And hopefully that builds upon it moving forward. And then, Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, hopefully the running lanes become that much more rich. The defense, though, was interesting, right? Like to see Kirk Cousins have a really solid game. And, Justin Jefferson, Bill Belichick's known for taking away that number one weapon on both sides of the ball. I think he did a good job slowing down Zadarius Smith, but against the Vikings offense, like Justin Jefferson was live, and that dude was making big plays. If you bet his props, congratulations. We talked about that on the Hurry Up offense last week, so definitely check into that every Thursday. Last week it came out on Wednesday, but we talked about those Justin Jefferson props, and weirdly enough, Bill Belichick was not able to take away that number one option for Minnesota, but the Vikings also got, contributions from TJ Hawkinson, Adam Thielen, both getting to the end zone. So all in all, this Patriots defense that has been really good this year, and Bill Belichick's still a mastermind on that side of the ball, wasn't their best game. So was that just this week, or will that continue to be something that's an issue? Or should we just give credit to Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings? We'll find out this week with New England, how do they bounce back from that? I'm interested to see, especially with extra time, Thursday to Sunday turnaround. Then we get the Seahawks, that's another loss, and this team is probably going to be headed down the board here pretty soon, especially with, a team like the Titans, I think will eventually bounce back, and maybe the Patriots too. I still like Seattle's offense, and all in all, I like the way they're moving the ball, right? And I don't think the offense is why they lost that game, but that defense is a liability, right? Like we saw games where Tariq Woolen calls on these turnovers, and Boye Mafe and Jenna Lewis are getting timely sacks. But if we're being honest with ourselves, that defense, specifically against the run, it's still not on 100%, right? Like, so still some work to be done on that side of the ball. And you saw that Josh Jacobs just gashed them, especially on that last play. That's evident. I think it's basically where that defense is at right now, where sure, there's maybe some young blocks that you're excited about and some things that might develop into some superstars, maybe star-level players. And probably a little harder to throw a ball against this team because of the immediate presence of a Tariq Woolen and even Kobe Bryant, who, week in and week out, I'm more impressed than I am concerned about him as a rookie. But yeah, they still have some work to be done. So imperfect roster, but they are ahead of the rebuild schedule, if you were to ask me. And then the Jets up 3 spots. And this is one of the huge talking points this week. If you were to take away the name Mike White, I'd love to see like a player A, player B comparison and just go find like a good Jimmy Garoppolo game. Because that's what that stat line looks to me, right? And it's the same offense, right? Same thing with Tua and Mike McDaniels in Miami, which I'm going to come back to in here in a minute. But that, if you take away the name Mike White, that's just a good Jimmy Garoppolo game where ball's moving pretty efficiently. They're able to run it at a pretty solid clip. Wide receivers are making plays, including this week. It's Garrett Wilson just hitting the brakes, stopping, pivoting, going out at an angle, and getting the 57-yard touchdown or whatever it was. That type of stuff. That's what Jimmy Garoppolo sometimes has, to his benefit in San Francisco. And sometimes his stat lines look like this. So I think Robert Saleh said it really well. He just made the easy things look easy. And that's Zach Wilson. As much as they probably, from a draft perspective, number 2 overall pick, you got to see, can he learn from this? I would hope he does, because it's another year where Mike White just took the easy stuff and had huge numbers because of it. So, hey, Zach, let the offense make you look that much better, because it's the offense that made Tua have a career year. It's the offense that's kept Jimmy Garoppolo afloat. So hopefully. But, man, I just think it's a hard turn back to that to see how much those players like Mike White, it feels like Wilson's lost the locker room. That's a hard thing to gain back. And considering Mike White is taking the easy stuff, there's just no guarantee Zach Wilson's going to do that. And you're in the heat of a playoff race, right? Like, you're fighting for a wild card spot. So there's not much room for error. But, man, I'm not saying Mike White is unbelievable. I'm not saying he's a franchise quarterback or anything like that. I just think, Zach Wilson isn't. And I think, I said this last week, Jimmy Garoppolo to the Jets next year makes a ton of sense. And, kind of going back to this Tua and, Zach Wilson comparison, they're playing the same offense. And Zach Wilson continues to be Zach Wilson, and Tua's having a career year. Granted, different years in which they were drafted, more NFL experience for one guy versus the other. But, yeah, I just, I don't want to give up on guys too early, but I think Zach Wilson's a miss. So Joe Douglas back to the drawing board. What are you going to do at quarterback? I'm excited to see, but the rest of that team is just so good. And I think Mike LaFleur, I think this is one of those moments where, like, as a play caller, you're like, see, yes, just give me somebody who's literally competent, somebody who can just run my offense and look at the numbers we can do and look at how good we can be. Now, granted, the Bears defense I get is terrible, but I think that's part of why, this looks like a good Jimmy Garoppolo stat line. It's a bad defense against an inefficient offense. So we'll get more data points next week. Hopefully they let Mike White start, and I want to see what Mike LaFleur and Mike White bring to the table. Let me see more with Mikes. Then we get the Ravens down a couple spots to 10, and this is one of the, kind of like a Tampa Bay where it's like, the execution and the on-field play does not match the names on paper. Like, what is going on here? And I think it was 6 drops from wide receivers this week. That's brutal, but Lamar Jackson's missing throws too. And I mean, hey, as big a Lamar Jackson fan as there is, and coming from a Steelers fan, I love Lamar Jackson. Should have been paid 2 off seasons ago. I'm all on board with that. But he missed some throws this week. There was like 3rd and short, missed throw in the flat to Patrick Ricard. It's just like, what? And there are a couple other throws. I can't go through the entire game, obviously, but also you have Demarcus Robinson just dropping one straight off his hands in the back of the end zone, which should have been a touchdown and probably could have sealed the game. What are we doing here? It's an inefficient team. It's a team that, despite good talent, aren't executing at a high level. And same thing with the defense, right? Like, letting Trevor Lawrence and, average wide receivers at best carve you up, that's concerning. Trevor Lawrence is potential franchise quarterback, so not as worried about that, but like Christian Kirk's winning these one-on-one routes, and Zay Jones is getting chunk plays against you. Like, those guys are fine, but nothing crazy. Like, where's Marlon Humphrey? Marcus Peters, where's your play gone? So, concerned about a lot of different things for this Baltimore team. Hopefully, next week they get back on track. They have a dominant win, and it's like, oh, never mind, forget all that stuff I was saying. It's just a bad week in Jacksonville. Weird game. That's all. But man, I don't know. I'm starting to think this team might have a potential slide here down the board, and they just need to start having their execution match the talent that they have on the roster. Just simply put, that's the only way I can really describe it. Chargers are up a spot. Nice comeback win. I hate that they were trailing to the Chargers for a majority of that game. Actually, these two teams were at an alt spread parlay I had at -2.5, so obviously the Ravens lose, that sucks, but Chargers did win, but they obviously didn't cover that. But it's just kind of weird spots for both these teams, and two teams that, again, names on paper, it's like, wow, these teams are great. But for the Chargers, Justin Herbert is that guy. And it isn't interesting considering last week I'm complaining about, hey, they looked good in the first half against Kansas City, but in the second half, where'd you go? This week was the opposite, where the first half it's like, why are you trailing to the Cardinals? And then Justin Herbert gets that offense moving late, and then you get obviously that touchdown. Austin Eckler barely gets it across the goal line, then the 2-point conversion from Gerald Everett. And it's also interesting talking about this Ravens-Jags game and then the Chargers and Cardinals game. Don't hear a whole lot. Maybe I'm not looking in the right place. Don't hear a whole lot about analytics and conversations about when you go for it and when you should attempt the 2-point conversion. It's interesting how loud that crowd can be when it doesn't work versus when it should. And, here you go. Here's my big brain theory. That's where I think football is going. And then give it a decade. About decade's time, I don't think there's going to be a conversation about should you or should you not be going for it. What do the analytics say? It's just about execution on those plays, right? It's just like how you don't question 4th and 10 someone punts it, but you see a shitty punt and you're like, what was that? I think that's going to be ultimately where 4th down and 2-point conversion kind of conversation moves towards the next decade, maybe 2 decades if we move real slow. But really interesting to see how quiet that crowd was this week after that worked and gave two teams wins that maybe they shouldn't have gotten. Anyways, that's just one tangent aside. Let me know what you think down below. Let's move on to the top 8. Bengals up a spot. Hey, gritty win, and that's the type of win that you need. And I mean, honestly, it resembled a whole lot of that divisional game. They just didn't have Jamar Chase. So it's good to see T. Higgins prove once again, kind of like he did against Pittsburgh, like, I'm a 1. My role is just being a number 2, and I'm fine with that, but I can be a 1 and go be that 50-50 contested catch guy, 6'4". I mean, just awesome play strength too, awesome body control. He's just so hard to defend on routes like that. No Joe Mixon. Samaje Perine, I think, was fine enough. I still think this is a game where he was going to go crazy. I think the Titans have a pretty good run defense, but it's nice to see that they do have that contingency plan in place. And Lou Anarumo, that as a DC, he continues to have that defense play at a pretty high level. Now, granted, this is not a Tennessee offense that has a bunch of weapons on the outside. Kansas City's going to be a different test this week. I want to see how no Chidobe Awuzie, how does that secondary hold up? But I think Cam Taylor played a pretty good game, pretty physical game, hard hitter, and it's the safety corner hybrid. I like that, kind of fits his draft profile, So they're piecing together. They're making it work. And sometimes you win games 20-16, and sometimes, if they beat the Chiefs, it's probably 38-35 or something like that. They beat the Chiefs twice last year by 3-point games. So they have a knack for winning these close ones. And, that's kind of the Joe Burrow, Joe Ice mentality in a lot of ways. So now let's talk about the Dolphins. They're up a spot. They really only played one half this game. They were up 30-0 at half. Now, granted, Chase Atkins, like I talked about earlier, just fumbling in the flat. Easy touchdown for the defense. And then you have that pick, and then Van Ginkel gets tackled at 2. First pick since like week 5. That's a little concerning for Miami, but, turnovers can be variable, and they can be kind of fluky from here and, from time to time. But it was good to see them be able to generate those turnovers, get easy points. And Tua, I think, played a pretty good game, had a ton of yardage, only the 1 passing touchdown. They ran the ball well. This one team that's a contender to win their division away from the Buffalo Bills, and then the team that I think is going to be picking number 1 overall. So they're just in 2 different leagues. So good showing there from the Dolphins. It got close in the second half, but Miami in their truest form really only played the first half. The 49ers, now this is a little bit of an interesting conversation. 1 through 6 all stays the same, which is probably so boring if you're a fan of those teams, but let me explain myself. 49ers, that win was ugly, but it's also a week after their most dominant win coming back from Mexico City. I feel like there's just enough components to make that game kind of awkward. So I'll let it be. But I could also see if you're a Dolphins fan, you're like, did you see the 49ers sweat out a 13-0 win at home against New Orleans versus us beating the brakes off of Houston? Well, I'd say, I like New Orleans a little bit more than I like Houston. But, I can see the argument being made that, maybe Miami should be ahead of San Francisco. And I think we'll get that answer this weekend as those two teams go head-to-head. I like the Dolphins plus 3.5. A little preview for the Hurry Up offense. Definitely come back to the channel. Check out that video on Thursday. Me, JT, and Mason going to be running through our favorite plays for this week. And I like Dolphins if you get them with the field goal hook. I think this ultimately becomes a 3-point game. So this would be a fun test. But if Miami wins, they're minimal flipping with San Francisco. And depending on how the top half of the board shakes out here with, the Chiefs, Bills, Eagles, Cowboys, Vikings, they could be moving up even more than that. So I like this Miami team. Don't think you have them at 7, you must hate them. No. I like them a lot. I just think 1 through 7 are all legit. 1 through 8, for all that matter, are legit. And then 9 and 10 are the Chargers and the Ravens, who feel like kind of sleeping giants right now. So the NFL is really good right now. Anyways, 49ers sweat out a win. Not great, but I'll keep them there at 6. Vikings, awesome win against New England. And they have this nice stretch of home games. They're back at home again next week. So interesting to see how the schedule kind of played out there and maybe how that worked to their advantage. They get absolutely embarrassed by the Cowboys, but they don't have to go anywhere. They can have that sit and simmer with them while they're at home getting ready for the Patriots. I think that did play at least a little bit of a factor, but Justin Jefferson continues to be an animal, and I was really encouraged to see, Bill Belichick known for taking away that number 1 option. You couldn't take away Justin Jefferson. Furthermore, top 3 wide receiver in the league. But you also got production from TJ Hockenson and Adam Thielen. I was actually talking with JT, talking more about the Hurry Up offense here. He's a Vikings fan, and I said, dude, you got to have at least 1 touchdown from Hockenson or Thielen. They each get 1, right? Moments of chunk plays from the run game, but it really wasn't great. But ultimately, I think that was just to try to keep the Patriots honest. And the defense, I am concerned about that secondary, but also Zadarius Smith was neutralized, so that secondary was kind of left out to dry. To that point, Danielle Hunter, starting to feel like you're not going to be back next season because you're not really living up to what your full potential is. And I wonder if part of that is just like, I don't want to be here anymore. They're ready to move on from, I don't know, not in the building. So I can't really fully speak to that, but would have liked to see that pass rush play a bigger factor in this game so that secondary is not being left out to dry. So we'll wait and see. Andrew Booth, I think this was his first ever start. So also some young pieces back there that are just going to need some time to get better. Then we get to the Cowboys at 4. You get the backdoor cover from the Giants, but especially after a rocky first half, the Cowboys answered back in a big way. CeeDee Lamb just making one-handed grabs left, right, and center. Tony Pollard, Zeke, I think they both ran the ball well. So, more of the same for Dallas. And, I think this week, maybe next week, we get the OBJ news. So it feels like Dallas is the clear front runner. And I think that team just becomes that much better, obviously, with the addition of a No Doubt Beckham Jr. Eagles, and by the way, I love their the finger guns. I just love how they execute that. Fletcher Cox gets a sack, and he's down on the ground, does it, and then Jalen Hurts getting first downs, and Jalen Hurts run for 155 yards. I don't know. There's just so much swag around this team right now, which, hey, I know 2011 called. They want their phrase back, but that's just kind of the easiest way I can describe it. And this was a game where it was like, okay, there's the Philadelphia Eagles we saw at the beginning of the year, where obviously the loss to the Commanders, then an ugly win against the Colts where they really didn't get it going through the air. The passing game was live. Sure, it took, the Jalen Hurts run game early to kind of boost the offense, if you will, but I was thinking even as that first half was unfolding, I was like, you know what? Maybe just Jalen Hurts needs like 8 to 10 carries a game. Maybe that's just what they needed to do, because I think the passing attack opened up this year so efficient and people were giving so much respect to an A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And I think Philly's standpoint was, we really want Jalen Hurts to use his legs as a last resort. And because of that, defenses were like, hey, he's not going to run unless it's the last resort, so we can put more people into coverage and we're going to put more focus on A.J. Brown and company. Maybe it's just those 8 to 10 carries a game where it's like, no, bring that safety back in the box or play a QB spy and take him out of coverage. You're going to have to account for Jalen Hurts, or he'll run for 155 in your head. And then once you saw that happen and you get those chunk plays, A.J. Brown starts to feel like he's getting open more. Devonta Smith, same thing. You still have that fumble from A.J. Brown, which is a little concerning, but other than that, I think he had a bounce-back game. The last 2 weeks been very quiet for him, and he also had the fumble against the Colts, the drop that became an interception against the Commanders. So it's good to see him get back going, especially after that fumble. He gets the touchdown, a couple big plays, especially on third down. I can't remember exactly where it was. Sorry, I just hit my mic. Can't remember exactly where it was in the game. It was like a third down, and it seemed missing Dallas Goedert, and I was like, third down's where it feels like they miss Goddard the most. A.J. Brown comes up with this huge 20-yard gain. I was like, there we go. This is the exact role why you give it an A.J. Brown, and with no Dallas Goedert, he's got to be the guy that steps up in that spot. So really encouraging there for the Eagles. Yeah, the defense gave up a lot of yards, a lot of points, but also I think, like that touchdown of Christian Watson, it's like, hey, we have a 2-score lead. We're going to play off keep the ball in front of you. And then, Christian Watson's built out of a lab, so he'll outrun a Marcus Epps. Sorry, it'll happen from time to time. So good throw from Bryce Love. I did that again. Jordan Love. And, Watson kind of did the rest. So I'm not too concerned about this Eagles defense. Hopefully once they get Jordan Davis back, then, the interior of that defensive line is really secure. And then, the ability to run against Philadelphia is kind of null and void. And this team is, right back in that Super Bowl conversation at, full strength. Bills, solid win against the Lions, and it's just another example of like, hey, when you have Josh Allen, the game's never done, right? You can kick a field goal and only give me 23 seconds, but watch out. I'm going to throw a beam to Stephon Diggs. That's exactly what that shit was, too. Insane throw. You can tell, again, I love watching Josh Allen play, but all in all, just a really nice showing, I think, from the Bills. I think the Lions came ready to play, and this was maybe a fight in a game that was a little closer, considering it was a 9.5-point spread, a little closer than a lot of people would have expected. But this isn't really the same Lions team of many Thanksgivings ago. So I think the Lions are a legit team, and they ran the ball well enough. They moved it through the air well enough. First game back for Trey White too. I think he's only going to get better and better. Ultimately, you just got to win games like this. And anytime you win on the road, that's a solid sign. And then the Chiefs take care of business against the Rams. It wasn't pretty. I really don't think. How many touchdowns were taken away from Patrick Mahomes, right? There was literally a touchdown that came off the board because man illegally downfield and Trey Smith. And then in that next possession, they're in the red zone. MVS has a drop. They have to settle for 3. Then you get to the fourth quarter, and Pat Mahomes throws a no-look pass. So he doesn't see Nick Scott's cut off the right, throws a pick. That was kind of funny. And then, they get the ball right back with another interception, have to settle for 3. I actually had a Chiefs teaser, Chiefs plus 9.5, over 35.5. And the over 35.5 was an absolute sweat. Now, granted, the Rams only scored 10 points. Bryce Perkins is very good. So the defense looked pretty good for Kansas City. But, those red zone inefficiencies, while I'm glad Kansas City didn't play their best game of the season against the Rams, because that would be a waste, right? I want to see their best game of the season next week against the Bengals. And I want to see the Bengals play their best game of the year against Kansas City, because that game could be awesome. So I'm glad it didn't come against the Rams. But that being said, it's like, hey, man, 3 versus 7, those need to end in 7 more often than they end in 3, right? And then just throwing a pick on a no-look pass, sure, the Rams were not going to make a comeback, so you can do whatever. But in a big game, you can't be quite that careless. But, Pat Mahomes, let him do his thing. So, I understand. But anyway, still got them as the number 1 team, but this was not their cleanest game. And this game should have been an even bigger win than it was. But nonetheless, a win's a win. And it took care of, one of the worst teams in the league right now with Bryce Perkins and the LA Rams. But that's going to do it for my Week 13 NFL Power Rankings. Love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who's your favorite team? Where do you think they fit in the mix? And who do you think maybe the biggest riser of this week should be? How do you think about Trevor Lawrence and the Jags they're showing? Oh, that's sort of fun stuff. Any thoughts you have? I'd love to hear it. Any football talk you want to have? Let's talk about it down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. If you stuck around and watched this video, it really does mean the world to me. Also hit that subscribe button while you're down below if you want to get more football content like this in your life. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.